Welcome back to the deep dive. So last week, looking at the week ending May 3rd, we saw the Jamaican agricultural market dip just a tiny bit overall, less than 1%.
Right, but the real story was that restlessness, that volatility. Almost 40%. Prices were all over the place.
Yeah, it felt like the market was sort of holding its breath, but underneath that surface, lots of movement with specific items.
Absolutely. We saw those tomatoes, plummy and salad types, really take off. Plummy jumped, what, over 40%?
Yeah, and salad around 25%, huge gains.
But then you had the sweet peppers, the yellow and red ones especially, dropping quite a bit. And sorrel, too, down over 20%.
So the advice then was maybe boost tomato output, figure out what to do with extra peppers, like processing.
And maybe pull back on stock for things losing value.
Right, exactly. Okay, so fast forward, what's the story now? We're digging into the report for the week ending May 10th, 2025.
Yep, using those agricultural market summaries again.
And the mission, same as always. What are the key shifts? Where are the opportunities, and the risks for anyone involved or watching this market?
And right off the bat, the overall picture looks different. For this week, May 10th, the average price actually climbed, up by 2.55%.
Oh, okay. So a swing in the other direction. What's the average price now then?
Around $616 JMD per kilogram. But here's the thing, that volatility we talked about,
Yeah.
it actually increased slightly.
Really? Even with the price going up?
Yeah, up to 41.62%. So those wide price fluctuations are definitely still happening. Very active market.
So it hasn't exactly settled down. The market sentiment is still neutral, though.
Still neutral, yeah. It feels more like recalibration based on local stuff, rather than some big system-wide shock hitting everything at once.
Right, localized factors. Makes sense. What happens in one parish isn't necessarily happening everywhere else.
Precisely. And we have to mention the background factor.
The hurricane season looming?
Exactly. It's not explicitly in these numbers yet, but it's hanging over things. Could definitely, shake things up soon.
Okay, let's get into the specifics then. Who were the big winners this week? Which crops saw prices shoot up?
Well, top of the list, quite dramatically, is local onion. A massive 53.95% increase.
Wow, 54%. What does that bring the price to?
About $567.52 JMD per kilogram. That's nearly a $200 JMD jump per kilo on average.
Goodness. Any idea what's driving that?
Well, it seems like supply tightening is the most likely cause. But get this, there was a huge regional surge. St. Anne saw onion prices jump 500%.
500%. Just insane.
500%.
Okay.
Yeah. That points to something really specific happening there. Could be export demand, could be a very localized supply issue.
Interesting. Okay, who's next on the gainers list?
Imported cauliflower, also a big jump, up 49.11%. That pushes it over $44 JMD per kilo.
Oof, that's pricey for cauliflower.
It is. Then we've got local ginger, up a strong 41.68%, now averaging around 991 JMD per kilo. Again, likely tighter supplies there.
Okay, ginger too. And what else?
And here's where it gets interesting compared to last week. Sweet peppers are making a comeback, some of them at least. Local green sweet pepper is up 25.65%.
Ah, okay. Green's up.
And greenhouse yellow sweet pepper, also up 25%. Almost the exact same percentage gain.
That is interesting because last week, yellow and red peppers were dropping significantly.
Exactly. A definite turnaround for green and greenhouse yellow shows how fast things can shift.
Okay, so onions, cauliflower, ginger, and some sweet peppers leading the charge upwards. What about the other side? Which crops saw the biggest price drops?
Leading the decliners this week is local string bean, down almost 17%, settling around 551 JMD per kilo.
17% down. Why the drop there?
Well, it also had really high volatility, up to 55%. That usually points towards oversupply, especially likely in regions with heavy fruit production where beans are often grown too.
Right, too much available, so the price falls.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Who else is down?
Local sugarloaf pineapple, that's down nearly 16% to about 438 JMD per kilo. Again, likely an oversupply situation.
Okay, pineapple's still struggling a bit then.
Seems like it. And then, local red sweet pepper. It continued its slide from last week, dropping another 14%.
So red peppers are still going down, even while green and yellow are recovering.
Exactly. Down to 1,662 AMD per kilo now. So, quite a contract within the sweet pepper category.
Definitely. What else?
Imported onion is next. Down almost 14% to around $660 JMD per kilo.
Huh. So imported onions down, while local onions are skyrocketing.
Yeah, stark difference. Really highlights the impact of local supply versus import dynamics.
Good point. And the fifth biggest decliner.
That would be local white or Lucia, down just over 12%, ending up around $719 JMD per kilo.
Okay, so string beans, pineapples, red peppers, imported onions, and white yams seen the biggest drops. Some continuity there with peppers and pineapples from last week's trends.
Precisely. Suggests maybe a persistent oversupply for those items, which brings us nicely to our special highlight.
Let me guess, Scotch Bonnet.
Yeah. The hot pepper, always an interesting one.
So what's the deal with Scotch Bonnet this week? It's still volatile.
Oh, extremely. So the average price is around $899 JMD per kilo. That's actually up slightly, about 3.95% for the week.
Okay, a small gain on average.
But, and this is the kicker, the volatility is an absolutely massive 70.23%.
70%. Wow, that's incredibly unstable.
It really is. That small average gain completely masks these wild regional swings. We're talking prices dropping 60% in some places while shooting up 100% in others.
So it's a total lottery depending on where you are and when you sell.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's a huge risk, but I suppose also a potential opportunity if you time it right or in the right spot. But it really hammers home that advice about managing inventory carefully.
And hedging, like you mentioned.
Exactly, especially for something this unpredictable. You know, for someone listening, that 70% volatility means the price can just swing wildly week to week. Very, very hard to plan around without some kind of protection.
Definitely. And speaking of those regional differences, which parishes are seeing the most extreme overall movements?
Well, St. Anne is just way out there. The average price movement across commodities there was a positive 160%.
Whoa. Driven mainly by that onion spike.
That 500% onion jump is a huge part of it, yeah. It signals some serious local factors at play, maybe high demand, maybe a real supply crunch just in that parish.
That's a massive regional distortion. Anywhere else stand out?
St. Catherine also saw pretty high average movement, over 129 JMD average change per item, and lots of variability too. Suggests a very dynamic, maybe unpredictable market there right now.
Okay, so lots of upward action, or at least churn in St. Anne and St. Catherine. Any regions showing the opposite?
Yes, St. Thomas is showing a bit of a concerning trend, an average price decline of over 17 JMD across the board.
So a general downward pressure on prices in St. Thomas.
It seems that way, yeah. A worrying sign for producers in that region, perhaps.
So very different stories depending on where you are on the island.
Oh.
Okay, let's pull this all together. Based on this week's data and building on last week, what are the key strategic takeaways?
Well, on the opportunity side, those big price hikes for local onion, ginger, and imported cauliflower look significant. If you have the means, investing in storage, maybe procuring supplies now, that could pay off.
Capitalizing on those increases.
Right, and those huge regional price gaps, like the St. Anne onions, that screams potential for arbitrage.
Arbitrage. So buying where it's cheap and selling where it's expensive.
That's the basic idea. But, it's not simple. You've got transport costs, spoilage risk, timing.
True. Lots of logistical hurdles.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But when the gap is out wide, like 500%, it might be worth looking into carefully.
Okay, so potential opportunities there. What about the risks? Still volatility?
Absolutely. That extreme volatility, especially Scotch bonnet, but also string beans. It can wipe out your profits fast if you're not prepared. Hedging strategies become really important there.
And the hurricane season.
And the hurricane season, yeah. Can't stress enough the need to prepare for potential supply disruptions.
Yeah.
That's a major risk looming.
So what are the concrete recommendations then?
Okay, so first, seriously consider hedge contracts if you're dealing in high volatility crops. Scotch bonnet is the prime example. It gives you price certainty.
Protects against those wild downward swings.
Exactly. Second, reinforce that advice from last week. If things like pineapples and red peppers keep declining, maybe reduce your exposure. Don't get caught holding too much stock that's losing value.
Makes sense. Cut your losses or minimize risk there.
And third, something new based on this week's sharp swings. Think about diversification. If your whole operation relies on, say, just Scotch bonnet or just string beans, one bad week can really hurt.
Spread the risk across different crops.
Precisely. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially when the baskets are jumping around this much.
Okay, great advice.
Yeah.
So wrapping up for the week ending May 10th, 2025, we're seeing a Jamaican agricultural market that's, well, recalibrating maybe.
Yeah, adjusting. Definitely active.
With real opportunities in things like local onions, ginger, imported cauliflower. But those opportunities come hand in hand with big risks from high volatility.
And that approaching hurricane season.
And those stark regional contrasts, like St. Anne booming while St. Thomas sees declines, really show you need to know your specific local market.
Absolutely. Strategic planning, managing your inventory smartly, considering hedging, and now diversification. Those seem like the key things to focus on right now.
So here's something to leave you with this week. Given these market dynamics, this volatility, and the hurricane season coming up, what steps could you proactively take? Not just to ride out potential storms, literal and economic, but maybe even to capitalize on these big, tricky price movements in the Jamaican agricultural market.
It definitely warrants digging into your own regional specifics and exploring those risk management tools.
Food for thought. Until our next deep dive.